Are you ready for some unknown South Carolina history? Daniel Coon was the most famous magician in the Dutch Fork area of central South Carolina, here in Columbia. Later, I'll talk about his prowess in the art of using a healing practice. More spectacularly, though, he could change shape into different beings and objects, which let him sit out the Civil War. Now, he was born in 1810, and Coon should have been too old to be drafted by the Confederacy, but still, Confederate soldiers with bloodhounds trailed him after he refused to enlist, saying it went against his principles. As a wizard, he could appear much younger than he was. People called him Little Daniel, which may explain why he was targeted. When a bloodhound was about to catch him, he circled his companion and told them both to stand still. The hound whined and backtracked after seeing that where the two men should have been standing was now just a pile of dead branches. Later, Union soldiers searched for him, and to avoid detection, he turned himself into a log. The soldiers sat on the log to rest and ate their food there. He later said they sat there and ate their food and rested, and Lord, they got heavy. I didn't see how I could stand that much longer, but when one of them took out a knife and began to whittle me, that just wouldn't do. Now, during the war years, he sometimes played practical jokes. At a spring where a neighbor's young daughter was collecting water, Coon turned into an old man's head with a long gray beard. No body, just a head on the ground. He winked at the girl, and she ran away in terror. Now, Coon died in 1876 after a life of healing, shape-shifting, and magically putting out forest fires. His house still stands on the Lexington County Museum property today. Now, the roots of his using magic. Germans and Swiss who settled in Dutch Fork, Dutch meaning Deutsch, brought a healing tradition called using with incantations known as the Zaubersprach. It mixed old world paganism and Christianity. I'll have the name in the captions. But now for an interesting twist. Users could only teach their skills to someone of the opposite sex, and the rites had to remain secret or they would lose all of their power. Now, this detail is referenced in my book series among the white magic users in the fictional town of Emerald, South Carolina, in my book series. But I digress. Again, Daniel Coon was the most famous of these users. As one account summarizes, he could use to stop the flow of blood, cure warts, heal burns. He could also walk around a forest fire or a field of burning broom's edge, and by repeating a formula could cause the fire to go out. He could change his form, and people saw him sometimes as a stump by the road where no stump had been. Little Daniel Coon learned how to do all of this from reading a book, and all over Dutch Fork, people know scraps of what was in it. They even know who wrote the book, but they won't tell you. Now, not everyone succeeded in this work. One enchanter tried to extinguish a fire and was cut off from escape and actually had to run and jump into Lake Murray in order to save his life. Now, a man named James Everett Keebler Jr. wrote a Carolina Dutch Fork calendar, published scraps from using the book he owns, written in 1847 by 22-year-old Dutch Fork woman Nancy Catherine Kennard Keebler. In these incantations, ABC stands for the sufferer's name, and XXX marks specific time intervals. Lee Gandy of Lexington explains the timing in his book, Strange Experience, the autobiography of a Hexenmeister. The first is said, and the signs are made when the hex undertakes the treatment. I'll write it all out for you guys now. The incantation is repeated, and the signs are again made half hour later. Third repetition and third signs are made an hour after the second, making a total of 9 signs in the course of the treatment. And again, you'll see a few examples here on the screen, but I thought that this was a bit of fun South Carolina history that I had never heard of. And y'all, we have been here since 1989. I've never heard anything about this, and I think a lot of times people assume that nothing happens in Columbia and there's no real true magical history in the center of the state, not counting the low country, in the center of the state. But yes, this actually goes along with the story I gave of the migrants or the immigrants, the who stayed in the Dutch Fork area during the Revolutionary War and turned Colonel Tarleton's soldiers into soapstone because they tried to mess with his wife. Either way, y'all let me know what you think about this in the comments.